Okay, in the last video, we noted that the view that analyticity plays a central role in philosophy is a common theme for both Frege and Carnap, the two authors we've looked at so far. That's significant because these are very different authors. These are two authors with very different approaches to philosophy in many ways. One being a rationalist, the other being an empiricist, one thinking philosophy delivers deep and important truths about the nature of the world, the other thinking philosophy does no such thing, it just tells us about language. In contrast, Quine is going to say there is no analyticity. So that entire method, that consensus that runs through Frege and Carnap should be abandoned. And one of the dogmas of empiricism is that there are analyticities. The other we'll talk about later, although we're going to focus mostly on the first one. So we're really focusing on points that are relevant to our dialectic, not everything in this paper. Okay, so here's a rough outline of what we'll go through. Let's start off with Quine's introduction, where he says, look, let me explain to you why people think that some statements are analytic and some statements are synthetic. Remember, synthetic is just the contrast class for analytic. For now, let's adopt a sort of metaphysical reading of analyticity, according to which a statement is analytic if it's made true by its meaning, and adopt a metaphysical reading of syntheticity, according to which a statement is synthetic if it's not made true exclusively by its meaning. Now, with that distinction in mind, Quine is going to say, here's why people think there is an analytic-synthetic distinction. And we'll go over that in this video, and in the next one we'll look at why he rejects the distinction. So let's suppose we have Caesar here and we have Brutus, and Brutus brutalizes Caesar. And along comes somebody who says, look, Brutus killed Caesar. Now, Quine's going to say the statement, Brutus killed Caesar, the thing said by this guy over here, could be false for a variety of reasons. It could be false because the guy in maroon here, dressed up as Brutus, is in fact an imposter. Therefore, Brutus killed Caesar is false. Instead, this guy who isn't Brutus is the one who killed Caesar. Or it could be false because Orange is an imposter. So this is someone dressed up as Caesar, a body double, knowing that Brutus was coming to assassinate Caesar, took Caesar's place so that the great leader didn't get assassinated. So the person lying here, yes, was killed by Brutus, but Brutus killed Caesar is false because the person lying here isn't Caesar. Or it could be true because a myriad of other facts are true about the world. Maybe this is Brutus and this is Caesar, but this Caesar isn't dead. Maybe this is Brutus and this is Caesar, and Caesar is dead, but it wasn't the blow from the stick that killed Caesar. Caesar had been poisoned earlier in the day, and the stick just happened to hit him shortly before the poison took effect. There's all sorts of ways the world could be that could lead Brutus killed Caesar to turn out to be false. But what Quine wants to note is this. The statement Brutus killed Caesar, not only would it be false if the world had been different in certain ways, but it could have been false even if the world is exactly as we take it to be. Even if this is Brutus, this is Caesar, Caesar is dead, and it was being hit in the head with a log thrown by Brutus that killed Caesar. The statement Brutus killed Caesar could still be false. Why could it still be false? Because this person here might have a non-standard use or interpretation of Brutus killed or Caesar. So suppose White over here adds, and when I say killed, I mean begat, gave birth to. Well, then Brutus killed Caesar is false because what Brutus killed Caesar, the statement in language means is Brutus gave birth to Caesar, and Brutus didn't give birth to Caesar. So this statement comes out false, not because the world isn't such that this guy throwing the stick killed this guy, and this guy is Brutus and this guy is Caesar, but rather this statement turns out false because the words Brutus killed Caesar coming out of this guy's mouth don't mean what we ordinarily mean by Brutus killed Caesar. Instead, they mean Brutus gave birth to Caesar, which is false. So this statement would be false. It could be false because Brutus killed Caesar. The statement Brutus killed Caesar would be false if the world had been different in certain ways, but it also would have been false if the word killed happened to have the sense of begat, happened to mean begat. And Quine adds, and this is all quotes from Quine, truth in general depends on both language and some extra-linguistic fact. So the truth of Brutus begat Caesar depends on what the words Brutus killed and Caesar mean. That's a truth about language. And they also depend on how the world is, this extra-linguistic fact, the fact that in the world things are this way. Hence, the temptation to suppose in general, again, we're still quoting Quine, that the truth of a statement is somehow analyzable into a linguistic component and a factual component. And once you suppose that the truth of a statement is analyzable into these two components, it seems reasonable that in some statements, the factual component should be null. It should drop out. And those are the analytic statements. So if we look back at our picture, the idea is that in some statements, they're made true by the meaning of the words plus the way the world is. That's how Brutus killed Caesar works. But in other statements, maybe the world component drops out and they're made true just by the meaning of the words. Okay, so that's the idea. That's where analyticity comes from. And then Quine's claim is going to be that this, for all its a priori reasonableness, and by a priori here he means just sort of like intuitive, for all its intuitive reasonableness, a boundary between analytic and synthetic statements simply has not been drawn. That there is such a distinction to be drawn at all is an unempirical dogma of empiricists, a metaphysical article of faith. Now, he's saying it's a dogma of empiricists. Remember, I said that Frege is not an empiricist. So why is he focused on empiricists? Carnap is an empiricist. Why is he focused on empiricist? Well, Quine has the sentiment popular in his day that empiricism is the only view on the table. So those crazy rationalists can go off and think what they want, but empiricists are serious people whom we should take seriously. And Carnap and his ilk are in that class. They're in the class of people who we should take seriously. And yet, thinks Quine, they appeal to this dogmatic, unempirical notion of analyticity. This dogmatic, unempirical idea that analytic and synthetic statements are importantly different, that there's a sharp divide between them. And what Quine's going to do is say, look, nobody's given us any reason to believe that there is such a divide, and without some reason to believe that there is such a divide, we should abandon it. Okay, so there is no distinction between analytic and synthetic statements, according to Quine. Now, I think it's a little more perspicuous, a little clearer to say this: all statements are synthetic. If we just define analytic statements as those which are made true by their meaning alone, and we define synthetic statements as those which are made true at least partly by the way the world is, Quine would say all statements are made true at least partly by the way the world is. So in effect, he's saying all statements are synthetic. Rather than saying the distinction doesn't make sense, he's saying, look, all statements are synthetic. Okay, we'll stop this video there, and we'll continue next time by looking at Quine's arguments for this claim that all statements are synthetic.